and MD Perkins address that subject in depth in the AFA Cultural Institute video, Stewardship in Action, The Power of the Boycott. They share the purpose of boycotts and show how they can impact the culture. We're giving that DVD to you free as our thanks for supporting AFA this month. Go to afa.net today for more details. afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Friday, September 26th, and one of the biggest stories breaking this week in the midst of talking about cancel culture and censorship is from the House Judiciary Committee, and specifically Congressman Jim Jordan. He posted this on X: breaking, due to our oversight efforts, Google commits to offer all creators previously kicked off YouTube due to political speech violations to return to the platform. But that's not all. YouTube also admits the Biden administration censorship pressure was, quote, unacceptable and wrong, confirms that the Biden admin wanted Americans censored for speech that did not violate YouTube's policies, details when YouTube began rolling back its censorship on political speech after the Judiciary GOP began its investigation, states that public debate should never come at the expense of relying on quote-unquote authorities, promises to never use third-party fact-checkers, and warns that Europe's censorship laws target American companies and threaten American speech. So a lot here. So Representative Jim Jordan from the great state of Ohio joins us now. This should have come years ago. We should have never seen YouTube and the Twitter files and all of these things, especially in the midst of COVID. I was one that several of my episodes were deplatformed from YouTube in the midst of 2020, talking, just, raising questions about the whole COVID narrative. So what does this mean overall for free speech?
Well, I think it's a win for free speech, and you're right. You highlight some of the key details there. A, they admitted that they were pressed to censor and that they did it. Two, they're going to reinstate the people who were actually kicked off of YouTube, who lost their account. That I think is a big win. Three, they indicated, as you pointed out, no more. That they will never use these fact checkers like other platforms. They never did, but other platforms had. They've committed to not use that because the fact checkers are, the independent fact checkers. Well, actually what they are is they're always biased to the left. And they went after conservative thought and conservative post and presentation. So that I think is good. And then finally, as you pointed out too, they highlighted the concern that's going on in Europe, which is real. And it's just a matter of time before the European laws actually infringe on Americans' First Amendment liberty. So I think all in all good. And of course, for me, Jenna, the big irony was so much of what they censored was relative to COVID. And of course, they were based on what the Biden administration was saying. And it turns out that the Biden administration, just about everything they told us about COVID turned out to be false. So they were censoring truth while being pressured to adhere to false things that were being said by the Biden administration, which is sort of the big irony.
Yeah, and I am so grateful for your work here and the House Judiciary Committee for actually getting to these conclusions and admissions from YouTube, and I think this is a huge lesson. So will there be any type of accountability for anyone either in the Biden administration, some of these former federal employees, or for YouTube?
Well, one of the things we're working on is legislation sponsored by Congresswoman Hageman. Harriet's one of our great members from the state of Wyoming. And she has a bill that we actually passed it out of the committee last Congress. We're looking to do it again this Congress. Didn't make it all the way to law. But the bill would say if there's people in the federal government who are involved in censoring Americans, you'd have a right of action to bring against them in court. We think that's just consistent with the First Amendment, making sure we protect the First Amendment. So we're looking at some legislative approaches to this. Now, while there won't be in this, this admission from YouTube that there won't be any compensation for people who lost their account over these years and lost the ability to make revenue from it, we look at, I always say, we look at the glass half full. The fact that they've admitted it and they're reinstating accounts. Some accounts were like big name, like Dan Bongino was lost his account on YouTube. So, and then there were thousands of other people. So that is a step in the right direction. We think a big step in the right direction, getting the admission from YouTube and Google and getting the reinstatement. But we're going to look at things in the future we can do that are even stronger and more helpful in protecting Americans' First Amendment liberties.
That's great, and I hope that more legislation will be forthcoming, and that's good to know as far as Representative Hegman's bill. Is that, in terms of where that's at in the process, is it helpful for listeners who want to support that and support that work to get involved in terms of an action item on that, or is that something that you anticipate will likely pass out of the House and then it'll just be a matter of the Senate?
Yeah. Well, we always appreciate citizens' involvement, but we passed it last year. We plan to do it again, and we think we'll be fine there. I think it's funny to me because you get these admissions, and then you look back and you remember just how bad it was and where we were headed. And but for President Trump's victory and the coalition he put together, remember the Disinformation Governance Board? I mean, the idea that there was actually a group of bureaucrats who were going to sit on some board and tell Americans what they could tweet and post and say and read. I mean, that is frightening. And particularly as we talked about before, when you think about so much of this was relative to COVID, and just about everything the government told us concerning COVID turned out to be false. They told us it wasn't our money used at that lab in China. It was. They told us it wasn't gain-of-function research done there. Yes, it was. They told us it didn't come from the lab. They told us the vaccinated couldn't get it. They told us the vaccinated couldn't transmit the virus. They told us masks worked. They told us 6 feet social distancing was based on science. And they told us this was the first virus where there was no natural immunity. They were 0 for 8, and yet they were censoring people who critiqued any of that. That's how ridiculous it was, how scary it was. But for good folks like you talking about this disinformation, remember Nina Jankowicz was running this thing? That was actually formed, and we got it disbanded, thank goodness. But they were moving down this road where the government's going to tell you what is misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. It is like, that is frightening. And so the turnabout we've seen, and again, I give Elon Musk and of course President Trump gets the credit because he put this coalition together and focused on this. But where we were headed, and but for his win, President Trump's win on November 5th, I mean, it was a scary, scary place where we're going relative to Americans' First Amendment rights.
Yes, absolutely true. I'm speaking with Congressman Jim Jordan, and it is really scary to think that this was even going on. And I mean, obviously, I've never seen anything like that in my lifetime. I wouldn't have thought before 2020 that was even possible. I mean, I remember talking to, a couple of fellow conservatives when the first, COVID narrative started to happen. And, they were kind of predicting some of these lockdowns and things. And I'm thinking, okay, but I mean, no, we're not, this communist nation. Yeah. I mean, that's never going to happen here. And look what happened. So did your investigation uncover why that moment and why the COVID narrative in particular? I mean, was this something that just the left used that as a vehicle toward their agenda anyway?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the latter. Remember, the Biden administration used COVID to say to folks in the military, you got to get the shot or you get kicked out. I mean, they told Americans you couldn't go. You talk about First Amendment. They said you couldn't go to work, couldn't go to church, couldn't go to school during COVID. And look, initially, I guess you can say that everyone was concerned. We weren't sure about this thing, but remember, Bill Barr had put out back in 2020, put out a memorandum, and then Attorney General Barr said in the I'll always remember this. He said the Constitution is not suspended during a crisis, and amen to that. And I would actually say that's when that's when the Constitution is most important. That's when it counts the most, is during tough times. During easy times, oh, yeah, everything's fine. But when it's the difficult times, that's when the Constitution matters. And I think the Biden administration totally lost sight of that fundamental truth, and was doing all kinds of things that restricted Americans' freedoms. Like I said, they told us you couldn't go to church, couldn't go to school, couldn't go to work, and it just made no sense how they handled that. And then when you're restricting speech, for goodness sake, that is just, I'll never forget when we had the witness at a hearing last Congress. She was the journalist from Canada, Rupa Subramanya, and she had covered the whole trucker blockade in Kansas during COVID. And she made a statement that I thought was so on target. She said, the hallmark of Western culture, Western civilization, is free expression. And when you stifle that, limit that, that is extremely dangerous. And I thought, well said, and that is so true. We got to be careful. And now what Google sent to us is they're pointing now, kind of coming from the same perspective we are here, and saying, look what's going on in Europe. Remember what happened 3 weeks ago, when we had Nigel Farage testify. The day before he testified here, talking about that the infringement on free expression in Europe and the UK, there was the comedian who was an Irish citizen who issued a tweet, posted a tweet in America, and then flies to the UK. And when he lands, he's arrested at Heathrow Airport. So an Irish citizen tweets in America, gets arrested in the UK. It's just a matter of time before that happens to an American. That's how serious this threat to free expression really is.
Yeah, and I am so grateful that at least the Republicans in D.C. are taking this incredibly seriously. Are you getting any kind of collaboration from those across the aisle who actually recognize that, hey, this is actually an American ideal, this is a big issue, and are you finding any modicum of bipartisanship?
Yeah, good question, Jenna. Some, but it seems like their primary focus is just always attacking President Trump. Their big thing right now is the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing, which I think is largely a business decision. You got Nexstar and Sinclair who are saying, we actually want someone on late night television for all our viewers that's not insulting half the potential audience every night. And so I think that was largely a business decision. They're trying to make that into a censorship issue, and I just don't see it that way. But yeah, they're helpful some, but they're so focused on going after the president that it seems like they can't really see much else.
Isn't that just sad? I mean, you'd think that free speech at least would be the one thing that's not actually controversial. But when you see what the Biden administration was willing to do, obviously there are those still in public office and who were in public office that disagree. And, one of the statements that was interesting in terms of what came out of this from, YouTube and Google, that public debate should never come at the expense of relying on quote unquote authorities. I think that is a phenomenal win and really important to underscore in all of this, because that was really what the left was trying to suggest, and what they still, I think, are trying to suggest in a lot of areas, like the trans movement, for example, that, if a doctor is telling you that you have to respect as a parent, your child's preferred pronouns. Well, they're the authority, they're the expert. And it's very ideologically driven. And I'm seeing the left, set up kind of this experts as kind of their strawman to say, this is not something that parents or Christians or conservatives can ever go against. I mean, even when we look at Ketanji Brown Jackson and her nomination and confirmation hearings, when she's like, I'm not a biologist, I can't speak to what a woman is. Well, biologists aren't the sole arbiter of the truth of biology. I mean, it's ridiculous. As a 2-year-old, my nephew can say that. So this whole relying on authorities broadly, I think, is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, no kidding. Of course, the best example in my mind is Dr. Fauci. He told us he was science. He was he was the smartest man who's ever walked the planet if you just listened to him, right? And And as I said before, everything he told us turned out to be false. I mean, he was wrong on the 6 feet social distancing. He was wrong on the mask. He was wrong on the fact that you get the vaccine, and then he said you couldn't get the virus. Well, he was wrong on everything, including the fact that where its origin. It came. Anyone with common sense now understands that this thing came from a lab. So. This idea that there's these elite, smart people who we have to listen to, baloney. That's not how it works, particularly in a country with the Constitution, with the Bill of Rights, and with the First Amendment. So, this is why this is so darn important. I will always also remember what RFK Jr. said when he testified in front of our committee last Congress. We invited him in as a Democrat. I mean, I actually took some heat because I had him, Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, all these Democrats we invited in. And people were like, "Well, we thought you were conservatives, Jordan. What do you?" I said, "Well, they're good on the First Amendment." And of course, now they've all left the Democrat Party. But RFK Jr. said, he said, when you look at history, it is never the good guys who are for censorship. It is always the bad guys. And that is so true. It's like censorship is about the people in power wanting to censor their critics, wanting to shut up their critics, and that is not how it works in a free society. So this is, again, why this is so important, and why our founders were so sharp when they designed the Bill of Rights and specifically the First Amendment.
Amen. And last question for you, Representative Jim Jordan, before I let you go this morning. So with all of the legislation that's coming out of the UK, I've had, a number of kind of watchdog groups on air saying that some of that legislation and that type, at least, is being proffered in states here, kind of some under the guise of protecting children online and some of these other pretexts. What is your view on that legislation overall, or that type, and how we can be very careful that we don't fall into a trap of pretextual legislation that ends up getting us like what the UK is? No,
I can't say it any better. It's like, look, we want to protect kids, and certainly illegal content is illegal, and you don't want that on these platforms. But you got to be very, very careful, because that is the line you get from Europe every time. We were over in Europe a couple months ago, whether it's the Digital Services Act in the European Union or it's the Online Safety Act in the UK. They are all built on that premise, and yet they are being used to, as I said, Graham Linehan, the comedian who tweets something, the Irish citizen who tweets something from the United States, flies to London, lands at Heathrow Airport, and gets arrested for what he tweeted. He's not even the UK citizen. So that's where it leads, and we got to be very careful about that. We just do, because, again, it's always done with that as pretext and the reason, and it's a very dangerous road to go down.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you drawing attention to all this. Thank you again so much for your work and for the House Judiciary Committee. And so Congressman Jim Jordan, always appreciate it when you join. And listeners should read, if you haven't, this post and this thread on the Congressman's X. It's at Jim_Jordan. And he goes even more in detail and shows, a lot of what has been exposed even in greater detail than what we've talked about this morning. All right, we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Hey, my name is Wesley Wildman.
And I'm Walker Wildman.
And we're brothers, and our family have been leading tours to the land of the Bible for more than 30 years.
Coming up in March of 2026, we would love for you to join us for something very special, a Footsteps of Paul tour, a journey through Greece.
We'll walk exactly where the Apostle Paul walked, through Athens, ancient Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica.
You'll enjoy unforgettable experiences and meaningful fellowship with believers and with Wesley and Walker.
And we'll eat well, laugh a lot, and yes, eat well again. And most importantly, we will grow in our faith as the Bible comes alive before your eyes. You'll get to see the very things that we read about or that your pastor talks about in church.
The Footsteps of Paul tour is March 17th through the 24th, 2026.
Register today at wildmangroup.com.
That's wildmangroup.com. We can't wait to see you there.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
My debt problem started probably about 2016. I needed my life to change financially. I called Trinity and I ended up joining based on high credit card bills and high interest rate. And my counselor at Trinity has been great, and Trinity has been helping me to get on the right path of paying off these credit card bills, bringing down the interest rate. They have consolidated my bills into one low monthly payment. And now I am finally getting out of credit card debt. So I just want to say thank you, Trinity, for showing me a better and greater path.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Sharon, and soon I will be debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starn. Stand by for news and commentary next. Californians may have a very hard time purchasing bath towels. That's because Bed Bath & Beyond will not be opening or operating any retail stores in California. Marcus Lemonis heads up Bed Bath & Beyond. He says their decision to boycott the Golden State has nothing to do with the far-left policies of the Democrats. He says it's a business reality. Lemonis releasing a statement saying California has created one of the most overregulated, expensive, and risk environments for businesses in the country. He says higher taxes, fees, and wages cannot be sustained by many businesses, not to mention the regulations. The announcement coming as Bed Bath & Beyond announced a comeback 2 years after filing for bankruptcy. Lemonis says the company will have stores in almost every other state in the country, meaning if Californians want duvet covers, well, they're going to need to book a flight to Tennessee. I'm Todd Stearns.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, a grand jury has indicted former FBI Director James Comey, and this was anticipated but broke late yesterday. And so this coming from the Washington Examiner, former FBI Director James Comey was indicted Thursday by a federal grand jury, marking a stunning turn in a years-long political and legal saga. A majority on an impaneled grand jury voted to indict the former FBI director on 2 of 3 counts sought by prosecutors. One count was making false statements, and the other count is obstruction of justice, according to documents filed at the federal court located in Alexandria, Virginia. So the indictment stems from the former director's 2020 testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee about his role in the Bureau's handling of the Trump-Russia investigation. So Attorney General Pam Bondi released a statement Thursday evening without even directly stating Comey's name. She said this: "No one is above the law. Today's indictment reflects this Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people. We will follow the facts in this case." Well, let's welcome in Gerard Folletti, who is Senior Counsel for the Lawfare Project. And Gerard, this of course is being painted by the left already and spun as well. This is just a vendetta that is being sought. However, Comey himself said in, it was, I think, an interview that justice only works when people who are criminals are held accountable.
Well, that's right. And using the Comey's own words, it makes sense to see where the truth lies. This is why a grand jury was impaneled, and the grand jury did return a bill of indictment, which means that there is enough there to take this further to trial and to see what the truth actually is. And it's only fitting that the former director of the FBI be subjected to the same system of law that we all are.
Yeah, and that's literally what it means, that no one is above the law, because if he was shielded from prosecution only because the DOJ or the prosecutors in this case were thinking, well, this will appear to be political, then they would be making it political, and it would signal to the American people that there are some positions that are genuinely above the law, and if you can politicize this enough, then you won't be held accountable.
And at the end of the day, we have to remember what this prosecution is about. This is not a prosecution for James Comey because he doesn't like Donald Trump. This is a prosecution alleging that he made false statements to Congress, that he lied to Congress, and that in so doing, he obstructed justice. And those statements don't have to do with whether or not he likes Donald Trump or what his political views are. This has to do with the application of the law to facts, to Comey's conduct as director of the FBI. And that should not be a political question. That should be a straightforward legal issue.
Right, and this is, as some legal commentators are already pointing out, this indictment now falls just shy of the statute of limitations, which I think is 5 years for this type of offense. And so the statements were made in 2020. And now here we are, 2025. This indictment is now handed down. Is this an instance, though, where this is being looked into potentially and this indictment coming because other conduct related to the Trump-Russia collusion hoax is outside of the statute of limitations? And does that even matter?
I think a lot of the allegations that come from the Trump-Russia collusion issue are outside the statute of limitations. We have to remember these started in 2016 and 2017, so a 5-year statute have run at the end of Trump's first term or the beginning of Joe Biden's term. Really, with President Biden, there was no incentive to investigate or prosecute misconduct relating to actions taken potentially illegally against Donald Trump. So now we're starting with a fresh slate and looking at the past to see what we can bring to justice. And what we can bring to justice are things within the statute of limitations, which would include the statements that Comey made before Congress in 2020.
Right, and I'm speaking with Gerard Folletti, who is senior counsel for the Lawfare Project. And so according to a statement that Comey himself put out yesterday after the indictment and then reports, he is expected to turn himself in today on that indictment. So what happens next in terms of the process? And this will be prosecuted in a federal court in Virginia. So, I mean, that's a lot of federal workers that are likely potential jurors. Does the DOJ have an uphill battle? Because I'm sure the defense will seek to politicize this.
Well, what happens next after he turns himself in and he will be processed and released, this is not something that he will be incarcerated for pending trial, is he is likely to file a motion to dismiss the indictment. I don't think that that's going to go anywhere. I think that constitutionally it's on solid grounds and that he will have to take this forward to trial, although his best bet is to have it dismissed. Finding a jury may be tricky, but then again, it may not be. We have to remember that there is still a lot of confusion and misperception about the Russia collusion, the allegations of hoax or the allegation of what Donald Trump was involved in. People do have a short memory, and they remember in tidbits. They don't remember the details. So it is possible to find a jury, even with federal workers, that don't know enough about the issues to be sitting and hearing this impartially. So I don't think finding a jury will be difficult. I think the harder part will be for the government to prove some of the elements, which is that he knowingly made materially false statements.
And Catherine Herridge, who of course, is an investigative reporter, and she's finally on X and has been for a few years. And I always appreciate her threads because they're very comprehensive. And listeners can read this entire thread at C__Herridge. For Catherine Herridge, she posts kind of this lengthy exchange and interaction that is describing exactly what is being alleged here. And she's talking about with the newly declassified records via FBI Director Cash into media leaks and the role of third parties, Director Comey's 2017 testimony to the Senate Judiciary about leaks appears to be problematic, and then goes on in that thread to talk about 2020 and the specific exchange that that the FBI Director Comey, or former FBI Director Comey, is then alleged to have said that he did not authorize any leaks. He's never done that. And so with this kind of, video testimony, it appears that probably just the knowingly or the intent piece is the only thing that may be defensible in this exchange, because if it's just factually true that he did know about it and he's at least making these statements, then that would appear to be very difficult for his defense.
That's right. Ultimately, the question here is James Comey a liar? And it's a straightforward, is he or isn't he? And to prove that he is, to prove that he made materially false statements, I think that he knowingly made these statements. I think that the government is going to call witnesses like Andrew McCabe, who has in the past, his deputy at the time, who in the past has said that he was authorized to leak information. There's likely to be testimony as well that Comey himself leaked materials to a Columbia professor. And so I think the government does have evidence that it will present. I think it probably presented some of this evidence to the grand jury in order to secure this indictment. So at the end of the day, the question is whether Comey was aware of that these leaks were taking place because he authorized someone to leak on his behalf. And that is what the jury will try to determine.
And so, Gerard Filletti, how much of this do you think is going to be over politicized in terms of following this? I mean, this represents, I think, the first really high profile indictment of someone who is part of Crossfire Hurricane. In terms of the whole Spygate narrative, this represents possibly the first accountability measure. And of course, as we've talked about, the left is already suggesting that this is just, Trump's vendetta and his DOJ, and he can't rein in his DOJ, which, is hilarious because they actually do act independently. But in terms of how the media is going to spin this, do you anticipate that this is going to be the biggest focus, as it has been for Donald Trump, with all of the issues and the lawfare that has been brought against him over the years? Or is this something that the left may know that is kind of a losing issue for them, and we won't really hear much about it other than some updates?
I think this will be heavily politicized. I think this is the hill that a lot on the left will be willing to stake their flag on and fight for. I think we can expect significant fundraising for Comey's defense and for elected officials on the Democratic side to come out, as they already have on left-wing media, strongly against this, claiming that it's a political abuse by Donald Trump, that this is retribution, that this is going after his enemies. The problem with that is, when you look at this, Comey is not being prosecuted for anything political that he said. He's not being prosecuted for anything political that he did. He's being prosecuted effectively for lying to Congress. And that's a bad hill to die on if you're on the left. You want truth and transparency. So ultimately, of course, the left is going to go nuts and make this about Donald Trump abusing the justice system. But at the end of the day, this is a president who has experience with that justice system, has seen it weaponized and politicized, and now it's being applied. The system is being applied to bring justice, to prevent that kind of abuse in the future.
Yeah, well said. And I hope that at least whoever is impaneled on that jury eventually, unless there's some kind of plea agreement, will be willing to follow the facts and obviously give Comey a fair trial, as he absolutely deserves, but that this is not decided or determined by the court of public opinion, but actually by true justice, because ultimately no one is above the law, and if you lie to Congress, then you should be held accountable. So Gerard Filletti, really appreciate your time this morning breaking this down. I am sure that we will be following this as more developments continue. So you can always follow Gerard Filletti on X. I'd encourage you to do that. Senior Counsel for the Lawfare Project. We'll be right back with more.
The Middle East, that's one part of the world we need to pay attention to, especially the country of Israel. Each week, I'll help you make sense of what's happening in that region through a biblical lens. I'll bring you important information about security threats, archaeological discoveries, biblical prophecy, ministries happening on the ground, and much more. I'm John Riley. Join me for the Middle East Report Special Edition every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio as I connect you to the people, places, and geography of what we read in God's Word.
Culture is a product of us being placed in a particular location, and it is God's desire that His light bearers would culture or cultivate a particular area.
Join Abraham Hamilton III as he presents the biblical case for cultural engagement. It's a powerful video resource from the American Family Association's Cultural Institute series.
You and I create the culture of our country.
Visit afastore.net.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
What if you were forced to live without a Bible? You know, that's the way it is for evangelical Christians all over the world. Only 1 Christian in 10 has a Bible in many parts of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. But hear from this pastor as he shares the reaction of a senior saint who finally received her own Bible.
She literally knelt down and cried. At the age of 60, she never had a Bible. It is so much fulfilling just to see people rejoicing when they receive their Bibles.
AFR listeners, with every gift today, you're putting tears of joy on the faces of Bibleless believers all over the world. You know, we want to do that for 4,000 waiting believers that we know by name at Bible League. We are far behind where we need to be. So at $5 a Bible, $100 sends 20. Would you pray about it and be involved today? Abraham?
You can give by calling 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or visit sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
If you are 65 or older, you know this, inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and copayments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now. 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And if there is one thing that we have learned over the last 2 weeks since the heinous murder of Charlie Kirk, it is how motivated people in America now are to ensure that the left does not have a monopoly on the marketplace of ideas, especially within high school and college classrooms. For far too long, I think we've had radical leftist teachers that have been able to spew their nonsense without really any accountability, especially in high schools, other than if parents have the ability and the option and choose it for private education or homeschooling, that kind of thing. And so Ryan Walters, who is the superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma, has been a champion of ensuring that Oklahoma does not continue down that track for a long time. But now this coming from the Epic Times, Oklahoma to establish Turning Point USA chapters in all state high schools. This is awesome. So Ryan Walters joins me now. This is great. And I think this is going to really give high school students the opportunity to not just feel like they can be conservatives in high school, but actually foster a culture of inviting them to be conservatives and to consider the ideas that are founded in truth and conservatism.
That's right, Jenna. I mean, I have never seen anything like the outpouring we've seen for Charlie Kirk, for folks wanting to be involved in Turning Point. We have been inundated with students, teachers, parents that want a local Turning Point chapter, and I don't think there's anything we could do better to help kids foster an understanding of American values, and especially that American value about freedom of speech and open debate. I mean, you know, it's one of those things I know you know better than anybody. Talking about the founding, talking about throughout American history, the spirited political discussions and debate were crucial in forging this country. And now you've got colleges, high schools that completely only allow the left's position to be talked about, shared. And you've got the next generation that are so hungry for, we want to hear about conservatism, American values, and we just want to have an open discussion and debate. And let's let the chips fall where they may. I mean, it's pretty wild where we've come because of allowing the radicals to take over both colleges, campuses, and K-12. But Turning Point USA is doing an incredible job, and so we're excited to partner with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as I've been watching more and more clips on all of my social media because it seems like, everybody is just reposting so much of Charlie Kirk's content. I was struck, and my listeners know I've been talking about this over the last several weeks, that I didn't even realize how much truth in terms of the presentation of the gospel of Christ he was bringing to college campuses. And to be able to sit under a tent and invite anybody to come and say, if you disagree with me, you should be the first in line, because he was so committed to the truth of the gospel and the understanding that this isn't just a position, but the biblical worldview, of which, of course, America's founding was premised in, rights that come from God, our Creator, the God of the Bible, that it's not just a view, it's the only internally consistent view that actually has an answer. He was so committed to that. It was like, hey, let me know what your questions are. Happy to dialogue. And he knew he would never lose a debate. And that's what we have to continue to foster in our young people, and be willing to answer those questions, but them be able to ask them in a forum that provides that fair and honest exchange. And so are you getting any sort of pushback against this? Because the left, of course, likes to shut down speech. They don't want to have the dialogue because they know that they can't win.
Oh, Jenna, you're going to crack up with this. The teachers union is fighting it. They don't want any Turning Point USA chapters. They say allowing the students to create their own chapters is indoctrination. And I go, guys, this is rich. So you force drag queen story hour on our kids. You force CRT on our kids. You force DEI, transgenderism nonsense, anti-American lies. Forced them on kids. And we say, hey, kids, if you want to join the club, you can join the club. It's up to you. There's no and they are trying to block it here in Oklahoma. We made very clear that they will not be blocking it. But again, to your point, what they want is only one side represented. They want to target and punish anyone with another point of view, another perspective. Just less than a week after people calling conservatives fascists, calling President Trump a fascist, and you're going, they don't care. They are going to continue to demonize and continue to try to shut down debate, while conservatives, we want open, honest debate. Hey, bring the other side in here. Let's have the discussion. We have confidence in our beliefs. We know that our beliefs are grounded in truth. Let's have the discussion. It is the left that constantly tries to bully using power, the other point of view, and doesn't want our next generation to even hear it.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, they're the ones saying that you can't hold people like Jimmy Kimmel accountable for what they actually said, and it's cancel culture and all this. They have no idea the difference between cancel culture and accountability, and that's exactly, I think, why we need a public forum to be able to discuss all of those things. And yet the left consistently proves that they're the ones that want a totalitarian society. They're the ones who want to have indoctrination. They're the ones who don't want the free exchange of ideas. They don't want the marketplace of ideas. They only believe in the Constitution when it benefits their outcome. It always cracks me up. Ryan Walters, my special guest this morning, who's the Oklahoma superintendent for public instruction. And it always cracks me up when people, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and, some of these guys in Washington get up and they have their giant billboards of blown up constitutional text. And I'm thinking, and of course they always proof text it and they quote it completely out of context, but they're only willing to even invoke the Constitution when they think it benefits their preferred outcome. They are not, they don't have any fidelity to the Constitution, even when they recognize that it means that they don't get to dictate. And that I find really remarkable and ultimately hypocritical.
Absolutely. And, Jenna, to your point, you look at this and you go, I talked to a mother a few days ago and she said, Ryan, what really strikes me in this whole thing is, this is exactly what I tell my son. Hey, share your faith. Engage with people that disagree with you. Have a good-spirited debate. And she goes, and that's what killed Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk did all the things I tell my son you should aspire to be and do. And she goes, and it is jarring. And then the other thing that's incredibly jarring is to go online and see my family members, see people I know and like, and I know there are different political persuasions, but, that's fine. To see them glorifying someone with my belief being assassinated. And she said, listen, I always thought, hey, this is, we disagree, and man, they get really riled up, but I never thought they would actually want me dead. And now that's a thought in my head. And this has to be completely rejected by American society. To your point, we have an open discussion of ideas. And guess what? Business owners absolutely should say, if you're going to go out and say that you want political assassinations of people you don't agree with, I don't want the name of my business being represented by you. I mean, I do not want that to carry that tag moving forward, because I'm telling you, it is a very scary place where this country is, where you've got a segment of the population that believe that that's okay. That is beyond sick, and the country will not continue to exist if that permeates society. So open discussion of ideas, bring ideas to the table. Let's debate them. Charlie Kirk was our best example of that. He was everything great about what open dialogue can look like, engaging the other side, being unbelievably thoughtful, intellectual. Let's discuss it. We have got to drive society back to that being the case on college campuses, in our schools, for America to continue moving down the road as the greatest country in the history of the world.
Amen. And, the left is terrified of that, and they are trying to even shut down their own that are in the midst of Charlie Kirk's assassination, saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we actually needed more people like him. And I'm thinking specifically of the New York Times opinion column by Ezra Klein, who is no conservative. But the headline was, Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way. And then, of course, Mother Jones, literally the same day, their headline is, no, Charlie Kirk was not practicing politics the right way. And then it became this whole controversy. And then the Ezra Klein had to stand by his column. And then there were all of these disbelieving leftists that were like, New York Times columnist defends his belief. And he's actually arguing that this is okay to say. And what struck me about that whole narrative is that the left is terrified of allowing a free marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, look, I mean, and that's where it's so important to continue this around understanding American exceptionalism. You and I have talked about this a lot and I appreciate all of your help in developing our history standards, and you were unbelievable to talk through kind of how do we get back to an understanding of these American beliefs, because you go out and, again, part of what Charlie did such a great job of exposing is just, guys, listen to, so much of what the college kids are saying is just nonsensical. I mean, it's, you start with the facts, classical learning. I'm a huge fan of it, because it's like, you got to understand the basics, got to understand the facts before you start arguing about it. You got to have this bedrock of knowledge. And Charlie did a great job of pointing that out of, guys, we are way off in our education system. If you're sitting here, if you're taking a literature class and you can't quote any of Shakespeare's works, if you don't, I mean, he did a great job of going through there going, guys, I don't know what they're teaching you, but that is not Western literature. We're not getting an understanding of the knowledge you should have. And I just think that is also such a unifying place. Free speech and engagement of open dialogue, that is key to the unity of the country moving forward, to be able to say, look, we disagree, but that's okay. Here's how we disagree. We go and debate. Violence is off the table. We're not going to do that. We're not doing anything like this. We disagree, but we do it in a civilized way. And then number two is you've got to have a national identity that you understand, and that is our history. Where did America come from? What were those core values? What was our history? And again, there can be disagreements on the direction moving forward, but that history and understanding of it and those founding principles keep people together and engaged in a way that not much else can't. And the last one is faith. I mean, Charlie, to your point, one of the things is I always knew it, and always in our discussions it came up, but watching the videos, I'm amazed at both, first of all, Charlie's passion for Christianity and his faith, and he was an unbelievable evangelist. I think one of the greatest we've ever seen, the amount of people he engaged. But I'm going to tell you the other thing that surprised me, Jenna, is how many times the college kids brought it up. They brought it up. So many times. I got this guy here. He says I can ask him anything. I want to know. I got questions about God and faith, and how often have we seen people recoil and pull back and not talk about faith, not talk about God? Charlie was willing to do it, and the college kids, it resonated. They had questions. They had thoughts. They wanted to know more about it. I think that's just, and you're seeing it multiplied daily here with Charlie's legacy. So I think that's an incredible movement going on in the country.
Absolutely. And, to your earlier point about how so many college students were suggesting that Charlie was wrong when he said, that the traditional leftist education right now in public schools is a total scam. And he would say that all the time. It's just a total scam. You guys are not learning anything. It's not the classical education. And one of the reels, I don't know if you saw it, Ryan, but I was just laughing because some student comes up and challenges him, and then he is a literature major, and Charlie asks, okay, well, what's your favorite Jane Austen book? And he's like, and he kind of stumbles over it, and he can't answer it. And then Charlie's like, "You're a literature major, and you can't answer your favorite Jane Austen." And then the guy actually says, "Well, Harry Potter." And Charlie just goes, "Oh my goodness!" And it just absolutely proved his point. And I was laughing at that because it just evidenced so perfectly exactly what we're talking about, and that kids, I think, are being robbed of a classical education and the opportunity to read literature that matters, primarily because the left doesn't want to expose them to morality. They don't want to expose them to the truth of history. And this is why you bringing back the Bible into the classroom is so important, because the left obviously wants to excise God from society. But your whole point that the Bible isn't just a religious text, it's history, it's morality, it's so many things. And kids at least have to have the opportunity to be exposed to that, along with, some of the greatest minds of human history and Western civilization.
And look, and I, that was why we were so passionate about being the first state to put the Bible back in the classroom, because, look, the reality is what the left wants is they want to take all the primary sources out of the classroom. So that's the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bible. And they want to, first of all, pretend like the Bible had no role in American history, which is laughable. I mean, it is the most cited book in American history, most purchased book in American history. The Citers founded Deuteronomy more than they did any other book. Just one book in the Bible, they cited more than any other work. But the other thing that is interesting about this as well is when they take out these primary sources and kids don't get to read them directly, well, whatever the law professor says or whatever the history teacher says is going to shape their opinion. So if they tell you that the Bible is terrible and justifies this and that, and the Constitution actually is the most pro-slavery document ever created, well, the kid has no context other than what they were told about the document. It is so important that when we teach our history classes, when we teach our English classes, the kids read the works themselves. They do a deep dive in the Constitution itself, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the Constitutional Convention notes, the Convention notes around the state, the Bible itself. When somebody quotes the Bible throughout American history, let them flip through the Bible and find the context of, well, what were they talking about here? What was the context when the Pilgrims talked about this in the First Great Awakening? What Jonathan Edwards, what were they referencing? What is the context here? We have got to get back to that, because that has been an extremely effective way that they have indoctrinated our kids, is they don't even read the Constitution anymore. They just listen to what the teacher says about it. Getting this in the hands of kids, the earlier, the better. Doing deep dives into these documents, the better. And frankly, I mean, I was a history teacher and share a love for history with you. You put it in front of kids, they fall in love with history. You let them read the letters from Thomas Jefferson and Abigail Adams. They fall in love with it. But you've got to give them access to history, give them the artifacts, give them the documents, let them do that deep study.
Amen to that. Well, Ryan Walters, we're already out of time, but, I love talking about these things with you, and I'm so grateful for your passion for this and for the change that you're bringing to the state of Oklahoma. And I wish that every state would follow suit and would bring the Bible back to classrooms, and also have the Turning Point chapters, on the high school campuses. It's such an important step moving forward to intentionally create and foster the marketplace of ideas, and just to expose kids to the truth and to all of the Western civilization thought and philosophy, so they understand America's founding. They understand what greatness means. They understand that morality is objective. They understand all of this. So we're praying for you. We absolutely champion and encourage you, and looking forward to our next conversation and helping out continually any way that I can. All right, and you can always reach me and my team at jenna@afr.net. Already out of time. Have a great weekend.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hey, if you're looking for family-friendly entertainment or resources to strengthen your walk with God, there's one name you should remember: American Family Studios. We don't just want to bring you shows, movies, and specials that will entertain or build up your family. We're committed to honoring God by making them both biblically sound and of the highest quality possible. Check us out at AmericanFamilyStudios.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Congress nears a government funding deadline.
Florida Republican Congressman Greg Steube on the Fox Business Network's Mornings with Maria says the Senate should bypass the 60-vote threshold needed to break the filibuster on a Republican plan to keep the government open.
Why should Chuck Schumer determine and negotiate what happens to the American people when we have the majority?
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wants certain health care provisions attached to the package to get votes from Democrats. Republicans argue those issues should be dealt with separately. The government funding deadline is September 30th. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted by a federal grand jury in Virginia on charges of making a false statement and obstruction of justice as part of an effort to manipulate evidence against President Trump amid an inquiry into allegations of collusion with Russia to win the 2016 election. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says this case represents much more about the legal system.
Lying to a court, manipulating a court, withholding exculpatory information to a court of law to get a warrant against an American citizen. For political purposes, the rule of law has died.
Federal immigration enforcement continues operations in Chicago in Operation Midway Blitz. Mike Tobin is there with the latest.